Good day traders, welcome to your weekly market fix. My name is John Jacobs, here to present you with a technical overview of the most popular markets and setups for this week. Please remember to subscribe, and if you have any requests, we invite you to reach out to us by sending us an email on the address provided below. Now let's get back into those charts. Starting this week by having a look at our Forex setups. First on the list is the EURUSD. The EURUSD, after having made a new structure low and finding some support from this lower diagonal, is currently trading right above our daily 21 EMA and also above our new weekly pivot at 1.162. Any price action below this will likely see a new structure low, and the area I've identified as a possible target should that happen is at 1.148. Also, we can see there's a good chance that we might still see price pushing slightly higher. Previously, we have had price trading in between the 50 and 100 daily SMAs, and that would mean we could expect price to move somewhere into this area as highlighted by the circle, and that could see price anywhere from the monthly pivot at 1.168 towards that weekly R3 coinciding with the daily 100 SMA at 1.178. Looking at the GBPUSD, we see something very similar. We can see we are still in a downtrend, and currently price is testing that daily 100 SMA, which it has done also previously over the last few months. Both of those previous times has seen price being rejected, and at this stage we suspect it might not be any different. Currently, we are trading below our weekly pivot at 1.376, and as long as price remains below that weekly pivot, I do suspect we'll see lower targets. The first most obvious target would be where the daily 21 EMA meets up with that daily 50 SMA, also coinciding with the weekly S1 pivot at 1.369. Any price action below that will likely see a much lower target somewhere towards the previous swing lows, and I've identified a target of 1.3449. In terms of a possible move higher once again, it's possible that we could perhaps make a double top, and that's why I've identified a higher level of 1.382 as well, should price perhaps move up once again, make a double top before selling off. Looking at the EURGBP, previously we've pointed out that we are possibly expecting a bottom, and looking at the bigger picture, we were expecting something like a double bottom, and also just looking at these previous swing lows, if we connect them, we can see we also have some diagonal support at this level. On Friday, we had a very bullish candle, possibly indicating that we could expect some bullish price action, sending price towards overhead resistance, which would be from that daily 100 and the daily 50 SMA, coinciding with the weekly R3 at 0.853, with the daily 21 EMA probably going to coincide with that weekly R1 at 0.8479. Should price make another low, I don't think it will be too drastic, perhaps just a slight new structure low, and that would probably likely then be at 0.841. Looking at the Australian dollar USD, last week we actually expected price to move lower, although we rather than saw a breakout from this overhead diagonal, and we can see that price then went back to test that head and shoulders neckline that was sitting just very close to where we had our daily 200 SMA. We haven't really tagged that the daily 200 SMA as yet, but it's possible that we could still see that being happening. So I've identified those levels, and that's sitting at 0.754. Although overall, I do suspect that we will still see price moving lower, and I suspect as long as price is trading below the weekly pivot at 0.746, we will see price progressing lower towards, firstly, the daily 100 SMA, coinciding with that breakout level, and that's sitting at 0.738, and should move back into this trading range. It's possible that we could see two more lower targets from the weekly S2, as well as that lower diagonal support area at the weekly S3 pivot at 0.721. Looking at New Zealand dollar USD, Also, a breakout that we saw last week, price breaking above the daily 200 SMA. It has not yet retested that breakout level, so that would be the most obvious first target. So we have that we also have that level coinciding with the daily 200 SMA and the monthly R1 pivot, all sitting at 0.708, or rather we can just make that 0.709. So a very possible target should price move back to retest this area. From there, we could either see price continue higher once again. I have some resistance marked out at this area between the weekly R1 and the monthly R2 pivot at 0.725. However, should price break back into this trading range, we have two more lower targets. The first one, 0.702, probably where price will meet up with the daily 100 and the daily 50 SMAs. And then finally, that lower boundary target at just above the weekly S3 at 0.690. Looking at USDCHF, USDCHF did seem to be trending higher. Although after this initial breakout from the symmetrical triangle, we saw quite aggressive sell-off with price moving back into this triangle range. I do still think it's possible that we will see another move higher, but we can see that we have our daily 200 SMA currently coinciding with that lower diagonal boundary. It's sitting at 0.914. And should price break below that, I suspect we can perhaps even be expecting a move even lower, somewhere between our S1 and S2 weekly pivots at 0.909. Should price, however, break higher once again, getting above our weekly pivot at 0.919, there would be two more targets that I've identified. Firstly, that monthly pivot at 0.926, and finally, the weekly R3 pivot at 0.936. Looking at the EURCHF, the EURCHF looking a bit different. We even have something that does resemble some kind of complex head and shoulders. We have also broken below structure, previous structure support, meaning we made a new structure low. We are trading below the monthly S2 pivot. So at this point, just judging from momentum, there's a good chance we see price continue lower. We have some support from the weekly S1 at 1.062. And of course, the area of our weekly R1 and monthly S1 coinciding with that daily 21 EMA rather at 1.07 would be very strong resistance. So should price move back into this area, I do suspect this will probably become a selling area at that 1.073 area. Looking at the USDJPY, so after a very strong bull run, we can see prices now recovering, or rather sort of correcting, and just looking at a Fibonacci retracement from those lows, we can see, and I'm just going to move that up slightly so we can see it slightly better. So there's our high at 114.76, and then of course there's our low at 109.119. So if we look at retracement levels, we have a 38.2 retracement level coinciding with the monthly R1 and the weekly S2, just below that 21 EMA, so that's at 112.55, so very possible target for this week. Should it move a bit lower, we have our 50% retracement sitting just above the weekly S3 at 111.896. So that too should be a possible target for this week. In terms of a recovery, I suspect we could perhaps see another move higher towards the previous highs from last week to make a double top, current maybe at 114.71. Moving on now to our indices and having a look at the NASDAQ. NASDAQ target from last week was at our monthly R1 at 15,386. So that target was reached. So for this week, the two levels to keep an eye out for would be firstly this area of support from our yearly R1 at 15,000. And now I'll just, we can just round that down to 15,000 because that will coincide with the daily 1 hour SMA and our monthly pivot, of course. So that would be a very strong area of support should price move back into this area. And should that happen, we could perhaps see price then find some support and move higher once again. In terms of a move higher right off the bat, it's possible that we could see a move towards the previous highs at about 15,700. Should price however break below that level of support, another area of support would be from our weekly S3 pivot at 14,660. Having a brief look now at our UKOIL, UK Brent crude oil. UK Brent crude oil is currently still trending upwards. It does appear to be losing some momentum, but the bullish candle on Friday could suggest we are still looking for a high, and we have that very clear target of our monthly R2 coinciding with the weekly R1 at 86.80, so still a possible target. After that, a correction would definitely not be out of place, and I think if you look at the pivots, we have a monthly R1, weekly S2 pivot coinciding with that daily 21 EMA at 82.4, so that could perhaps be a good area to keep an eye out for a correction. Should price break below that, the next area of support only comes in from our monthly pivot and then the daily 100 and daily 50 SMAs in this area at 76.54. Moving on and having a look at gold. Gold has formed an inverted head and shoulders. We initially saw a nice bullish break with a very quick retracement after that, but then once again we found some support. Currently price struggling to break above this daily 100 and the daily 200 SMAs, currently trading right on both of those levels. Also currently trading right on the new weekly pivot at 1,788. So I think as long as we stay above this level, we can perhaps suspect a new move to test that upper diagonal boundary at the weekly R1 that's sitting at 1,817. However, should we lose this weekly pivot level, another area of support would be the weekly S1 at 1,764. And if we also lose that, the lower end of this support structure would be a move towards the previous swing low from the right shoulder of this inverted head and shoulders, and that would be somewhere in between those two levels, perhaps somewhere at 1,750. Although at this stage it does appear that gold is starting to turn bullish, and I am putting a slight bullish bias on this commodity. Looking at one of the other commodities, platinum. Platinum is currently also in a bearish trend. It has now tested the daily 100 SMA and does seem to be rejecting this area, just looking at price action so far. So should we see more more bearish candles, especially if it were to drop below the monthly R1 at 1,050, it's possible that we might see price starting to move lower even more and heading towards the lower end of the support structures, and perhaps even testing that daily 50 SMA that will likely coincide with the weekly S2 at 1,005. Finally, concluding by looking at our cryptocurrencies, we'll have a look at Bitcoin and also Ethereum. Bitcoin still right in the supply zone, have absorbed most of that supply, and currently we are pending to see what is going to happen. I see we have some good support from this monthly R2 pivot as well as our daily 21 EMA. Those levels probably meeting up somewhere in the range of 58 to 59, but we can just average that out at about 58.5. So as long as price is staying above that level, there's chances for another move towards the highs. Resistance at the weekly R1 pivot would give us a level of 65,500, and a break below that level could see price heading back all the way down to support from the yearly R2 pivot at 46,000. Moving on and concluding with Ethereum. Ethereum had this inverted head and shoulder setup with a target at that monthly R2 that was sitting at 4,600. We have not yet reached that target. We are currently trading above the weekly pivot, so that is still bullish, and you can see this trend is showing no indications of reversal as yet. So as long as we stay above the weekly pivot at 4,050, there's a chance that we will see price moving higher to complete that inverted head and shoulders target at 4,600. However, should we lose this level, there would be another level of support from the monthly R1 at 3,800. And if we lose that level as well, there's some additional support from this area that I've highlighted with the red line, and also from our daily 100 SMA and the monthly pivot, all coinciding at 3,250. That concludes this week's video, and as always, here is this week's pro trading tip. The best way to improve is to learn, and the best way to learn is through experience, and especially from our mistakes. For this reason, we encourage all traders to keep a trading journal to keep record of what worked and, more importantly, what didn't, and to do more of the former and less of the latter. So until next time, we wish you all the best of your trading, and remember, trade smart and trade successful.